us a bit of background about how the 70% capacity was actually reached, saying that it was actually the taxi industry that proposed this to the minister themselves, and that the taxi industry is currently doing government work and is subsidizing the commuters, that it is the one industry in the sector that is not being subsidized by the government, and saying that the minister is going out of his way to project the industry as unreasonable. And obviously there a strain in the relationships and a lack of trust that seems to have occurred between the minister and the industry there. And once again, they're reiterating that the relief fund that they had been offered was not acceptable to them at all. And we do know that the Minister of Transport has said that that is a non-negotiable on their part. As far as SARS is concerned, they've requested that the tax clearance certificates that they receive from SARS be enough to prove their certification for all those taxis that are licensed. And that obviously part of the process of the formalization. And as the afternoon continues, we'll get more details about that and talk about the formalization process. The operating license requesting that receipts be deemed enough as a proof. One of the key and some of the key outcomes that came out of today is that as of tomorrow, the taxi industry, all taxis will be operating at 100% capacity. And we do know that that is not according to the regulations and according to the agreement that has been reached. They are currently at 70%. They will be resuming all long-distance traveling, and no permits will be required for those long-distance travelers. Those are some of the key things, and they're saying that if taxis are impounded, then they will park all their taxis until every single impounded taxi is released. But we'll continue unpacking this as the afternoon progresses. And staying with this leading story this afternoon, we continue looking at the ongoing battle between the Taxi Industry Association and government regarding the issue of additional relief funds requested by the sector, some of the issues that I've just highlighted. Now, for more on this, we are joined by Siyabulela Fobosi, who is a PhD candidate at the University of Johannesburg and a minibus taxi industry researcher, and he joins me now on the line. A very good afternoon to you, Siyabulela.
Good afternoon to the listeners. Thank you.
From the research that you have been doing, focusing on the taxi industry, today's happenings and the announcements that have just been made, did those come as a surprise for you? The reason why the president of SANTACO says they've gone ahead with these announcements is the fact that the Minister of Transport has postponed at least 4 times already.
Yeah. As we know that the industry has been facing challenges, for quite some time, especially since the early 90s, from 94 until now. So there's been a challenge, of formalizing the industry and the challenge of getting the industry regulated. With some of the taxi operators, not having the operating licenses, and also the industry, the fact that the industry is not subsidized, putting the pressure, on most of the taxi operators. So hence that, hence some of them say, look, we are against this money that is allocated to the industry because it's not enough. So some of them, have spent quite a lot of money, on paying, the taxi finance, for example, repaying some of their taxes, and also paying for insurances, so they spend a lot of money on that, but I think, going back to 100% is really going to, put pressure, is going to put some of the commuters rather at risk, because it's going to be a challenge, to really ensure that the commuters are protected, when they are on the taxi. So I think there really needs to be detailed discussion. So the minister needs to also avail himself, to actually discuss with the taxi industry, to iron these things out, to discuss, very clear, to say, look, this is what we think can be done in order to address some of the challenges in the industry. Because the formalization process really has been, facing, a lot of challenges because it has what I call the formalization pitfalls.
Perhaps, Siyabulela, let's talk about that. Let's actually break down what this formalization process is supposed to look like and what it would entail.
Okay, so what this formalization process, would look like first would be where some of the, in fact, all of the taxi operators, have the operating licenses, and where all of them, are registered, with the Department of Labor, for example, and where the taxi drivers, are issued with pay slips, and where they receive decent wages, and where where the taxi is recognized, as a dominant player, in the public transport sector, by the government. Obviously it is a dominant, public transport sector, but it needs to be formalized in a context where in fact, all of the taxi operators have the operating licenses. Because to be quite honest with you, there's quite a number, of taxi operators that, are operating illegally. So they don't have the operating licenses.
One of the things that was brought up during the media briefing today is the sense from the taxi industry feeling that they've done their bit. They feel like they've really met government more than halfway. When lockdown was first declared, they transported the essential service workers. They mentioned that 190,000 taxis were not operational, were out of service, and they were hoping that the government would perhaps give them more of a lifeline than what they're receiving now. There was also the sense of frustration and a historical frustration that over the past 7 ministers, there have always been promises, dates set for when formalization would actually take place, when recognition would take place, but all of these dates have come and gone. Where does this leave the relationship between the taxi industry and government right now? Also, perhaps there are some quarters in society who would label the taxi industry as a law unto themselves, that they do what they want when they want. Your thoughts?
The biggest challenge, that has been there, over the years. So over the years, there's been a lack of what I call a political will. There has not been a political will, from the leaders to actually intervene in the industry, to actually change the situation that is there in the industry. So I think the COVID situation has really put government, has really put pressure on the government to ensure that it turns, the situation around in the industry. Especially where there's now 1.1 billion allocated. So there's been some pressure, coming up, from the current context. So there's not, been, a very much political will, in the past, until now. So one of the biggest challenges really has been that, over the years, to make sure that, look, the industry is transformed, for the better.
Siyabulela, before I let you go, are we likely to see a point where the taxis literally do not operate? And should that be the case, how will South Africa's transportation system survive during this time?
It will definitely not do well, because as we know, about 70% of commuters in South Africa are very much transported by the minibus taxis. So the industry plays a very big role, in actually transporting, people from their taxi rides to their places of work. So if it happens where there's a national shutdown, so in fact, most of the people will be affected, especially where some, very few people are transported by buses and trains. So because the industry transports about 70%, so it will really affect, the country. It will really affect, the economy of the country. So hence, I've recommended, very much that. So there needs to be a point where the tax industry and those in power, in authority, in government, sit down, seriously to iron out, to discuss some of the issues in the industry, to really deal with the issues, to really say, look, this is what we think can be done to actually turn the situation around. Because really, this is affecting people. As we know that the industry is also supporting some of the informal traders in the tax rate. So when this happens, so the people in the informal sectors, in the tax rate, the informal traders are also affected.
It certainly is a spiraling situation. We'll have to leave it at that for now.